Good evening. I'm afraid that the organizers have inflicted me on you a second time, but I think the subject is so interesting that hopefully you'll be able to pay attention until the end, and the drinks which are waiting for you outside. I realize it's going to be an unpopular panel because it's so late in the day, but I think we have such an interesting group of people here, a lot of natural intelligence on stage to discuss artificial intelligence. And although the titles of the gentlemen on stage might not seem immediately relevant to the subject, I think it's important to explain why they're so interesting for this topic. Let me begin by Ambassador Ndemo of Kenya, who, before he was an ambassador, was also the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Communication and is also a professor of technology both in Kenya and in Nigeria, and has also lectured elsewhere in Africa and written books about technology in Africa. And here we have Ambassador Ronald of Malta, who's actually sitting in Addis and covers Rwanda. These are two major hubs, I think, of technology in Africa, and also has a background in education and the private sector. And of course, we have Mr. Elmerini, who's CEO of a company that invests a lot in technology and also is the, I think, rotating chair of Africa Links, which he'll tell you about in a minute. So they're all extremely competent to address this issue. And if you don't mind, we'll start with Ambassador Ndemo. I hesitate to call you Professor Ndemo in this context, who agreed to give us a little overview of where he thinks Africa stands today in this question of the AI revolution.
Can you hear me at the back? Okay. Thank you so much. As the speaker said, that Africa isn't behind or remaining behind in AI, but I must say here that Africa is not a monolith. I mean, it's just not like the same all through. There are areas where we have conflict and other things which have impacted on education or impacted on adoption to technologies. But by and large, AI is being utilized across Africa. I would say there are, other than the key, you see South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, some other countries are also trying to get into that space. There are those you call whom have run quite far with respect to the utilization of AI, especially in areas of health, agriculture, education, where it's being deployed. Several African countries have proper policies around data and also developing roadmaps for AI. But what I can say here is that the problem that has been is that we tend to see challenges more than seeking solutions. I say this because most people say, what is the infrastructure? We need to build this infrastructure. As people complain, they look at legacy infrastructure, for example. People have been looking at the connectivity with respect to mobile coverage, and that's where they would get data for their devices. But at the same time, we have satellite coverage, which is actually much, much cheaper than the other broadband, which we think is the one that gets you across the continent. So we need to take less of the challenges that are ahead, devices, infrastructure. And when they complain, there are several smartphones within the home, only that men don't want to share their smartphones with their wives and other things. So we need to see less challenges and use AI. It is being used widely, by the way. For example, in my country, people access loans because of credit score. And so people may not know they're using AI. Or in healthcare, in very remote places in Kenya, we have scanners now, AI scanners. Doctors used to tell patients or women who are pregnant that you need to be near a hospital, otherwise you lose your life. We never used to have that, but these scanners are helping because they are AI driven. So we can go into the tiniest village. We need to remove the fears of that people come and talk about AI can destroy, AI is going to take the world, and we are stuck there and talking about challenges rather than seeing the opportunities in AI. So Africa is doing well. We need to emphasize that we need to leverage AI to move faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. May I just ask the organizers to try and ask the people at the back to stop chattering or to go outside? Yeah? Because they're actually interfering with the excellent presentations here. Ambassador Ronald, you're based in Addis, which is, of course, the headquarters of the African Union, and you've been following, I think, the evolutions in this sphere. And we heard Samson Itodo, who is a member of the AU panel, advisory panel on AI, which I didn't even know existed. And so it shows that the AU has seeing the opportunity coming up. What's your take on how well the AU has taken stock of the AI revolution?
Do I need to press anything? Yeah. So, firstly, before I answer the question, thank you very much to the organizers. One great outcome from this event is the opportunity to listen and to absorb different points of view, which in the Addis bubble I wouldn't normally have exposure to. And the Addis bubble also includes the African Union. So being able to listen to so many views is really useful. So thank you to the organizers. The question about the African Union. The African Union and Africa in general is actually quite advanced in this subject. And I would share your optimism that AI is not the future, that AI is pretty much the present. And I was delighted to hear the presentation of the glass is not half empty. The glass is 3/4 full when it comes to Africa and AI. So my understanding of Africa is fundamental to the Embassy of Malta. So allow me to just say something about the Embassy of Malta a little bit. We see our role as creating new trade opportunities. We are a country that was colonized and yet is in the African Union. And as an English-speaking country in the same time zone as Africa, that's a very important role in the technological sector. We have distinct strengths in maritime, which is increasingly using AI in terms of logistics, in terms of making decisions about deployment, et cetera, et cetera. We're very strong on health, which has a strong AI component. Around that, I would mention that BioNTech, for instance, is a German company, but KENUP, the organization behind BioNTech, is based in Malta. And I say this because when we're looking at research funding, in order to bring Europe and Africa together, it's really fundamental to have the right partners in place. Now, the partners who can leverage funding, who can develop African products in the AI sector and take them forward, and who can reflect the African Union's strategy and policies. And in this, I'm quite heartened because our objective as Malta isn't to sell Maltese products in Africa. That wouldn't make sense. You look at the map of Africa, and Malta isn't even a village. But we're a platform where African products can be taken into Europe. And when we're looking at AI products, the list of really successful AI products from Africa is very, very impressive. I've just listed some of them here. I won't go through all of them. But Zipline Rwanda operates on AI. in order to take the right decisions. Flutterwave, a Nigerian AI and fintech, which has an AI solution to find fraud within financial systems. Very, very interesting impact. And for cross-border payments, to have an AI component into that. 4G Capital in Kenya, which does microfinance and AI. Koniku in Nigeria, which can use AI to actually smell explosives and to help security companies in airports to take security decisions. This is very impressive in terms of the output that is coming through from Africa, which, frankly, hasn't even started in Europe yet. That is the important point. M-Pesa didn't start in Europe. M-Pesa started in Kenya. So we need to look at Africa as a point of optimism. One really interesting company which I came across recently is Batasia. They do real-time translation of film in local languages. Again, incredible. So what is the African Union's approach to this? The African Union is providing a policy framework, as it should do, and there are 5 aspects to this. One is capacity building. It's really important to have African software engineers developing African solutions for African problems. The data governance protocols need to be in place as well. So the unification of the ethical side, sustainable development, but also infrastructure development. So the AU is playing a very fundamental role in this, providing a policy. I think what is lacking, however, is the finance of this. So it's really important for Africa and Europe to be talking in terms of financing, in terms of activating Global Gateway, which we heard about earlier, so that we're not simply talking about computers, but we're talking about software, we're talking about new product development. It's a very exciting time in the technology that we have. I'll just make 3 last points before I pass on. The African Union is also very cautious so that Africa doesn't become a data extraction continent. The risk for Africa is that Africa would be a passive donor of data rather than an active producer of knowledge. And that is a risk that has been identified by the African Union and needs to be addressed. Data sovereignty is also an area that needs to be discussed. We can discuss that in more detail. And finally, the importance of funding data centers in order to increase the memory, the power of data, because artificial intelligence is not only here to stay, but it's the new frontier, which 6 months ago was probably not where it is today. The pace of change is so fast, it's scary, but it also holds great hope.
Thanks a lot. That's a great segue to the last speaker, because you mentioned that one of the key challenges is maybe capital, and I believe that you're investing a great deal in this sector in Africa. So perhaps you could give us an overview of how you see the AI sector developing and the opportunities you see for the private sector in this development.
So, good evening, everyone. If you allow me, I would like to share my point of view in French, just to be clear as soon as possible.
On est bilingue ici, je crois, donc on est traduction simultanée.
Donc, tout d'abord, juste 2 mots concernant Africa Link, parce que je suis ici en tant qu'entrepreneur, mais je suis ici surtout en tant que coprésident d'Africa Link, qui est une communauté d'entrepreneurs européens et africains qui compte aujourd'hui 230 entreprises, dont 48% sont des entreprises africaines. Lorsque je parle d'entreprises africaines, ce ne sont pas des filiales de grands groupes européens, ce ne sont pas des filiales de groupes occidentaux, ce sont des entreprises créées par des entrepreneurs africains. Nous sommes répartis dans 20 pays africains et dans 4 pays européens. Pourquoi une répartition sur les 2 continents ? Pour une raison toute simple, parce que je l'ai entendu ce matin, il fallait absolument changer de logiciel de réflexion. Donc je pense que nous, membres d'Africa Link, ça fait un moment que nous sommes déjà dans un autre logiciel qui permet juste de travailler de manière équitable et de générer de la richesse pour tout le monde. Et donc nous travaillons pour consolider justement la relation entre l'Europe et l'Afrique, parce qu'il y a quand même beaucoup de choses qui se délitent. On l'a entendu ce matin. Quand j'entends ces chiffres-là, très sincèrement, c'est même pas que ça m'effraie, je ne les comprends pas. Il y a des centaines de milliards de dollars qui sont dans les flux nord-sud. Et à côté de ça, il y a tout le monde qui est étonné de voir que seuls les Chinois, seuls les Indiens, y compris les Turcs aujourd'hui, parce qu'on ne les a pas cités ce matin, mais les Turcs font énormément de mal en Afrique. Même un pays comme le Maroc aujourd'hui est extrêmement plus présent en Afrique que l'Europe. Donc je pense que la démarche est à changer. Donc nous sommes ici pour consolider cette démarche nord-sud, mais nous sommes aussi dans une démarche qui permet d'ouvrir les marchés européens aux entrepreneurs africains qui ont des créations justes, impressionnantes. Alors, je vais reprendre un petit peu l'exemple de M. l'ambassadeur, si vous le permettez. Il est clair qu'il y a énormément de créativité en Afrique. Il n'y en a pas suffisamment, mais il y a des sujets extrêmement importants. Je vais profiter de propos qui ont été signalés au dernier Mobile World Congress à Barcelone. Aujourd'hui, l'énergie consommée par l'IA dans le monde est l'équivalent de la consommation, puisqu'on est à Bruxelles, je me permets de le citer, de l'équivalent d'un pays comme la Belgique. C'est quand même assez colossal. Un jeune Africain a développé un composant qui permet de faire tourner une IA avec une consommation 100 fois inférieure à la consommation aujourd'hui des grands groupes, des DeepSeek, pour ne pas les citer, des ChatGPT, et ainsi de suite. Il est tout seul dans son coin. Une organisation de 3 centres de recherche. Excusez-moi, je vais citer des centres de recherche français que je connais mieux que les Belges ou autres. Donc le CNRS, qui est un grand centre de recherche, le CEA-Leti, qui est le centre de recherche du Centre d'études atomiques, et une société privée, je reviendrai après sur les partenariats publics-privés, qui est juste Huawei.tech. Ils ont développé, certes, un produit équivalent, qui consomme, certes, 1000 fois moins que les énergies des grandes intelligences artificielles, mais le jeune homme, dans son coin, a développé juste un bijou actuellement. Donc aujourd'hui, des exemples comme ça, nous pouvons en citer des quantités astronomiques. La seule difficulté qu'on rencontre en Afrique, c'est de dire comment généraliser cela, comment uniformiser cela et comment donner plus de moyens à ces jeunes créateurs pour que justement leurs idées, elles prennent forme. Je l'ai entendu aussi ce matin, je pense que c'est le vice-président de la Chambre de commerce qui l'a cité. Est-ce qu'on est capable d'aider les PME pour qu'elles puissent amorcer effectivement des business ? Là aussi, nous, en tant qu'Africa Link, nous avons, vous imaginez bien que nous voyageons beaucoup, nous avons rencontré des ministres en Afrique, nous avons rencontré des chefs d'État, et tous se posent la question, donc, comment aider la jeunesse à transformer leurs idées en business, et comment aider le secteur informel pour, si je peux utiliser le terme, s'industrialiser. Nous avons rencontré beaucoup d'organisations, institutions financières, l'AFD, la BPI en France et autres, pour leur exposer différentes solutions pour nous donner accès à une toute petite partie de ces fonds dont on parle par centaines de milliards à droite et à gauche. Pour une raison toute simple, c'est que au niveau des investissements, quand vous voulez monter des partenariats entre l'Europe et l'Afrique, trouver des millions ou des dizaines de millions d'euros, c'est très facile. Trouver 50 000 euros ou trouver 10 000 euros encore pire, c'est extrêmement compliqué. En Europe, en France, en Occident en général, on l'a entendu aussi ce matin, le crédit n'est pas cher, et en tout cas beaucoup moins cher que l'Afrique, même si les taux ont augmenté. La garantie est facile parce que des banques, des institutions étatiques mettent en place des garanties, ce qu'on n'a pas aujourd'hui en Afrique. Les investisseurs sont aussi frileux en Afrique. Donc comment aider tous ces gens-là à prendre confiance et à investir dans des projets ? Donc nous avons proposé à des institutions financières de nous épauler et de nous donner accès à la gestion d'une partie de ces fonds pour qu'on puisse, nous, gérer des enveloppes un peu plus petites. Toutes les institutions qui nous ont reçus ont accepté nos idées, les ont trouvées très intéressantes, mais malheureusement ont tardé à nous donner un coup de main à ce sujet. Et du coup, nous, membres d'Africa Link, nous, entrepreneurs d'Africa Link, nous avons créé notre propre société d'investissement. De telle manière à ce que ça serve de fonds d'amorçage et qu'on puisse aider des jeunes créateurs d'entreprises à donner vie à leurs projets. Un jeune entrepreneur qui crée son entreprise, c'est déjà son emploi qui est garanti, C'est sa famille qui sort, entre parenthèses, de situations délicates. C'est peut-être des emplois créés qui vont aider aussi d'autres familles à sortir de la misère. C'est de la création de richesse, c'est de la contribution à PIB. Vous connaissez mieux l'équation que moi. Donc, l'idée d'aider des jeunes entrepreneurs à avoir accès à un fonds d'amorçage est effectivement quelque chose d'essentiel en attendant que les banques se décident à mettre en place des systèmes pour en tout cas les jeunes créateurs, avec des taux d'intérêt moins importants et avec une notion de garantie qui est aussi importante. Donc ce fonds, cette société d'investissement, nous l'avons créé pour dire à toutes les personnes qui nous ont reçus que nous sommes prêts aussi à mettre de l'argent de notre poche et en espérant que lors du deuxième tour de table, qu'ils viennent abonder sur ces fonds pour nous donner un peu plus de moyens pour qu'on puisse générer encore plus de business. Mais ça ne s'arrête pas là, parce que là aussi, quelqu'un a posé la question ce matin sur l'accompagnement. Aider un jeune pour donner vie à son idée est extraordinaire. Mais l'accompagner pour gagner en maturité, c'est encore mieux. Donc, les membres d'Africa Link, qui ont mis de l'argent pour créer Africa Link Invest, sont aussi mis à la disposition des jeunes créateurs d'entreprises pour dire « vous êtes jeunes, vous manquez de maturité, donc on va vous accompagner ». Donc ces gens, les actionnaires d'Africa Link Invest, participent directement au comité de sélection des dossiers d'investissement, participent au comité d'accompagnement pour que le créateur d'entreprise soit le plus mûr possible et le plus rapidement possible. Donc, si vous voulez, globalement, on essaie juste d'être cohérent entre nos propos et nos actions. Il y a des trous dans la raquette en termes d'investissement, on essaie d'y pallier. Il y a un manque de maturité, on essaie aussi de le mettre à disposition des jeunes Africains. Mais en tout cas, ce qui est sûr, c'est que la créativité et la volonté d'entreprendre existent aussi en Afrique et nous sommes là pour l'accompagner.
Merci. C'est vraiment génial, ces histoires, c'est très encourageant. Aujourd'hui, on a parlé de Global Gateway, et je crois qu'il y a une enveloppe consacrée à l'Afrique de l'ordre de 120 milliards, donc c'est presque la moitié de l'ensemble du Global Gateway. Et une des priorités de Global Gateway, c'est la transition numérique. Et je me demandais si, dans les faits, vous aviez déjà eu l'opportunité d'avoir accès à ces sommes mirobolantes dont on parle dans la transition numérique. Et peut-être, dans le même ordre d'idée, comme l'ambassadeur Ronald est membre d'un pays, représentant d'un pays membre, s'il en sait quelque chose dans la mesure où, justement, c'est ce genre de choses que le Global Gateway est censé favoriser.
J'ai trouvé, c'est dommage qu'il ne soit pas là, j'espère qu'un de ses représentants sont là, j'ai trouvé les propos de monsieur Younous Oumarji, vice-président du Parlement européen, extrêmement pertinent ce matin. Et comme nous sommes en train de prendre des rendez-vous au niveau de l'Union européenne et de la Commission européenne, donc on va demander aussi un rendez-vous auprès de lui pour effectivement voir comment avoir accès à ces fonds-là. Aujourd'hui, nous n'y avons pas accès. Les seules discussions que nous avons eues sont avec des institutions financières françaises qui ont trouvé les idées que nous leur avons proposées extrêmement intéressantes. Et je ne désespère pas que lors du second tour de table, qu'elles abondent au fonds d'investissement que nous avons créé.
Ambassadeur Ronald, peut-être vous voulez en parler et aussi peut-être parler en lien avec cela, avec ce sommet interministériel qui est prévu. I'm wondering if this is an issue on the agenda of the interministerial summit that will take place, I believe, in May, where there's some discussion about whether AI will be on the agenda or the use of Global Gateway funds for AI. Will this be on the agenda? Do you know?
I don't know, because the announcement was only made today about the meeting and the agenda hasn't been set yet, but it should be on the agenda. And Global Gateway should be precisely doing this. So the investment in roads is very laudable, but we have an urgent need to be investing in this sector now, not only in digital cables, but also in entrepreneurial skills. My strong advice to... I regularly get edutech entrepreneurs coming to me in Ethiopia, and they ask me, how do I get my idea scaled up? And my advice is to take it to Europe, not necessarily because Europe is a better place, that's not the point, but to capitalize the idea. Because taking it to a country like Malta means that you will get attention from banks, you are paying lower rates of interest on the capital loan, You're operating within a European Union environment, so there's all the regulation in place. Now, that is not a brain drain suggestion. That is a growth for the business suggestion to ensure that youngsters are capitalized in order to take their business up in scale. Because if we wait for Global Gateway to come through, the bus will have left on the artificial intelligence opportunities. These opportunities are now. They're not in 2 years' time. So I strongly recommend to young people to focus on capitalization and growth in the next 6 months, because if they miss out on the next 6 months, the pace of change is so fast that they're going to miss the opportunities.
Ambassador Ndemo, a question I have for you is, both as an ambassador but also as a professor, we heard this morning Mr. Ba, who was saying that government just has to get out of the way and let these bright, dynamic Africans get on with their ideas. What do you think the role of policy is for this? And what do you think? Do you think education in Africa is meeting the challenge of the AI revolution from your experience of lecturing in different countries in Africa? Do you think that the new generation is being equipped with the skills to take up the challenge?
What we call Gen Z in Kenya, they have caused a lot of problems, but not problems, but made enough noise that the policymakers are beginning to listen to the young people. In my view, that is the benefit that we have. I mean, the advantage. We have almost 60% below age 35. And we need to develop every bit of brain. And what you see now, the number of young Africans working in the Middle East in computer science, in AI, is growing. You go to Dubai, they talk about AI, but those working behind have come from Africa. I just came from Kenya, and in the plane, are young Kenyans going back to US where they're working for Microsoft, working for Amazon and stuff like that. I am not opposed to that. That is good, because if you see what happened to India, it is the Indian diaspora that moved back to develop the Indian farmer to be what it is. What I'm trying to discourage is Africans looking up to the Western world to finance or to collaborate. Everything has been written on the wall by the recent geopolitical dimensions that aid is not there. I mean, our hopes that Global Gateway is going to solve our problems, it's false completely, because the US has delinked from the USAID. Europe is trying to get every bit of cent towards security. You saw UK announcing that we are cutting aid to increase in defense spending. That means that it's going to be, Africa should not sit that until we get the resources, they must begin to mobilize. When I talked about diaspora, they must convert those resources from consumption towards investment in what my colleague has said here about making these enterprises becoming profitable. The age of aid has gone. I mean, I can bet here that it's not going to be there in the coming days. We must begin to think differently as Africa. And that's how we can work as partners. So if you are hoping that, and I don't think anybody here, most people, if you are thinking that we're going to get aid from Europe or US to come, you would be very old before you see it.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I received instructions from the organizers that I should try and bring this panel to a close quite early because of the late hour, and I think this was an excellent soundbite to close on. The age of aid has gone, and we have to think differently now about financing the future. I think it's been a very interesting panel discussion. I found it extremely encouraging to hear all these stories of startups in AI, and it makes you realize that AI is not a separate subject. It's actually mainstreamed in many existing businesses, and the challenge will be to actually use AI for all these health industry or telecoms industry. But I feel that Ambassador Ronald wants to make a closing remark, so I think it's only fair that maybe I give you all each a closing remark, but be quick because otherwise I'm going to cut off the microphone.
No, it'll be very quick. I think it's more than a partnership. I think that the strengths of Africa are actually much bigger than we realize. And my closing remark would be simply to say that AI requires two components: energy and water. And when you look at the data centers that are opening up in Ethiopia, they are opening up in Ethiopia because energy is cheap to free. When you look at the countries in Africa that have water supplies in order to cool down the servers, you're looking at Lesotho. You're looking, therefore, at countries which have the opportunity to radically reform their fundamental economy around AI in a way which makes AI a resource, a mineral, just as important as oil, just as important as tantalum. So when we're talking about partnership, Africa has a very strong hand because it has those two fundamental elements, energy and water, which make the business relationship between Africa and Europe even more compelling for Africa. So my message is one where I want my small country to be first in the queue to understand that Africa is a continent on our doorstep that we need to do business with.
On parlait juste de partenariat et je voudrais juste insister aussi sur ce point. Les investissements sont nécessaires. Là, le Global Gateway est important, mais je pense qu'associer les financements qui proviennent des institutions, qu'elles soient européennes, nationales ou autres, mais associer aussi les grands groupes. Et nous, lorsque nous, PME, on arrive à mobiliser de l'argent pour donner des chances à des jeunes créateurs d'entreprises, je pense que les grands groupes peuvent le faire aussi. Et je pense que les États devraient nous écouter. Et un trio d'engagement entre ces trois entités étatiques, grandes entreprises et PME est nécessaire pour donner encore plus de coups de pouce à la création d'entreprises.
Merci beaucoup, M. Elmerini. Et je pense que c'est un bon lien avec le panel que j'ai animé plus tôt sur la politique de développement et comment elle évolue. Et je pense que c'est la direction dans laquelle va la politique de développement. On parle toujours de blended finance, de partenariat public-privé. Je crois que c'est un peu le sens de l'avenir. Et je pense que là, grâce à ce panel et grâce à vos interventions, on a vraiment perçu le potentiel énorme qui est devant nous et devant l'Afrique. Et donc, nous espérons tous que l'Afrique et l'Europe sauront saisir les opportunités que présente l'intelligence artificielle. Mais à nouveau, je voulais vous remercier parce que vous apportez énormément d'intelligence naturelle à ce débat. Et je voulais vous remercier tous d'être restés si longtemps. Et je pense que les organisateurs ont prévu des boissons pour vous récompenser de votre assiduité. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.